extreme confession methods, brazen bulls, and new fears unlocked at sea. What? Today we are back at it, breaking down and reacting to the gruesome truth behind ancient punishment devices and their impact on the human body from a scientific and medical perspective. Let's dive right in. Number 5, the brazen bull. In the chilling chronicles of history, few torture devices evoke the same level of dread and impending doom as the brazen bull. Sometimes known by other names such as the bronze bull or the Sicilian bull, this metal monstrosity was an ancient torture device that emerged during the 6th century BC in ancient Greece. Designed to execute and torture victims, it took the form of a hollow bronze statue resembling a bull. But this was no simple bronze statue. The contraption had a door on the side through which victims were placed inside. A fire was then started beneath the statue, heating the metal to unbearable temperatures. This twisted creation was also constructed with pipes and whistles so that when the victim screamed in agony within the bull's belly, the metal amplified the sounds, mimicking the sound of a roaring bull. From a medical perspective, the brazen bull's horrific spectacle was a calculated punishment, intended to amplify the victim's suffering from both a psychological and physical aspect. Physically, the victim's body was first subjected to searing heat, causing intense burns and scorching pain. The metal's heat conducted throughout the enclosure would have definitely scalded the victim's flesh and caused excruciating injuries. Also, something to think about is that bronze gets extremely hot. The average melting point of bronze is between 1790 and 1900 degrees Fahrenheit. 2nd, 3rd, or even 4th degree burns where their skin would blister and char, leading to severe tissue damage. Skin never looked the same again. And as all of this is happening, the brazen bull's design also amplified the victim's cries, making the experience all the more horrifying and deadly. One would hope that the victim would pass out and hopefully first succumb to the smoke and lack of oxygen in the enclosed space before the situation really started heating up. Number 4, keelhauling. Next up, a haunting maritime practice that once plagued the high seas. Said to be used by the Navy and pirates during the 17th and 18th century, keelhauling was a terrifying ordeal reserved for those found guilty of serious offenses during the age of sail. See, the name itself comes from the Dutch word keelhaulen, meaning to drag along the keel, which is exactly what this cruel practice did. Initially, the sailor was stripped, tied, and suspended by a rope from the ship's mast with weights or chains attached to their legs, dropping them into the water. Once submerged underwater, the setup would drag them underneath the vessel's hull from one side to the other. The sailor's body would scrape against the barnacle-covered hull, inflicting agonizing pain and often leading to severe injuries. From a medical standpoint, if the person did not drown within minutes by swallowing large amounts of water and getting little to no oxygen, they would sadly suffer severe trauma. For one, their head would be smacking repeatedly against the keel, which would cause definite traumatic brain injuries. Additionally, their body would be subject to intense friction, abrasions, lacerations, and contusions from being dragged and scraped against the underbelly of the ship. Also, you have to think of the pressure of the water against the skin combined with the force of being pulled by a rope while sailing was underway. This would have led to excruciating injuries, blood loss, permanent disfigurement, and of course, would not usually be sustainable with life. In the small chance that this person did survive this and was hauled back on board, death would still most likely result from the wound infections. Number 3, the breaking wheel. Our next heinous instrument of very horrendous outcomes, the breaking wheel. Also known as the Catherine wheel, the execution wheel, or simply just the wheel. This insane instrument of cruelty existed in many forms, some lying down, some standing up tall on display, but all equally destructive and meant to be a very public form of punishment for serious crimes. There were many variations of this painful practice, but to put it simply, prisoners were either broken by the wheel or broken on the wheel. For instance, in the first example, a person doing the punishment might drop the wheel on the victim to break their bones. In the second example, the condemned would be tied to the wooden spoked wheel so that the punisher could systematically break their bones. The goal was not to kill the prisoner, but rather severely mutilate them with an iron bar or some other tool. They would start usually at the bottom, breaking the leg bones and working their way up the body all the way to the head, crushing the bones, bludgeoning them, and often twisting them or repositioning them on the wheel where they would be left for hours or even days. In terms of the medical aspects of the breaking wheel, unimaginable pain and destruction of the body, as the bones would be shattered, causing intense fractures, severe skeletal injuries, massive tissue damage, internal bleeding, possibly ruptured organs, catastrophic physical trauma, and permanent disfigurement, often leading to decreased blood volume, shock, and eventually death. Number 2, thumb screws, a sinister and not so pleasant instrument of retribution. This demented device was born during the medieval and early modern periods, and similar to the other contraptions of chaos I've already mentioned, it could be described really as one word: painful. Known sometimes as the thumb crusher, thumbikin, or pillywink, it may not sound all that dangerous, but this deceptively hurtful device was so notoriously effective at extracting confessions or punishing individuals deemed enemies of the state through means of unrelenting pain. So how did the thumb screws actually work? Bones were crushed, surrounding tissue was subject to intense pressures, and I'm sure that it's easy to imagine that there would be lots of fractured bones, dislocated joints, and severe tissue damage. Besides all of that, you can actually have permanent neurologic damage. So if your nerves are intensely damaged, you can continue to have pain throughout the rest of your life. And they've actually shown that people who have had a nice cursive writing now cannot write thereafter. So it has a huge degree of damage that could occur. And most people may not realize that some places, such as our fingers and lips, have much more touch receptors than other parts of our body. The pain inflicted by this device was both immediate and long-lasting, often leaving its victims with permanent disabilities and disfigurements. Also, variants of the thumb screws actually existed in many other iterations as well. For instance, a knee crusher used the same sort of mechanism as the thumb screws. There were also reports of devices like head crushers as well. Starting in the Middle Ages and often beyond that time period, monarchs, armies, and religious organizations all have used any method necessary to maintain power, including extracting confessions with the likes of anguishing thumb screws. Number 1, the blood eagle. Ever wondered what this grotesque means of punishment was about? Well, let's dive into the supposed barbaric details. Although there is some debate on whether this over-the-top punishment was actually real or just concocted for movie magic. For instance, it does show up in the popular show Vikings and even the Assassin's Creed Valhalla video game. The blood eagle ritual was supposedly used first by the Vikings during the 8th to 11th centuries. It was allegedly associated with the legendary Viking Ivar the Boneless, who punished a rival king in this terrible way. The blood eagle's gruesome process began with the victim being tied face down with their dorsum or back area exposed. From there, the one doing the punishment would make an incision or cut along the spine, opening everything up and carefully breaking the ribs. This allowing the ribs to be pulled apart and to be displayed outward, forming the shape of wings, hence the name blood eagle. As you open up the ribs, you get the exposure of not just your spine in the back, but you also get the exposure of your lungs. So now you have lung tissues just sitting out there. This process led to extreme pain and agony. Breaking the ribs and filleting the back caused severe injuries, including punctured lungs, damaged organs, and massive blood loss. If that wasn't terrible sounding enough, salt would then be poured into the back wounds to enhance the pain. The medical components of the blood eagle were horrific, including excruciating pain, shock, and inevitable death. It's really hard to even imagine the psychological trauma of it all. This harrowing process was clearly intended to evoke terror and serve as a warning to others. Now, despite its gruesome reputation, some historians actually question the authenticity of the blood eagle ever being used, suggesting it might have been sensationalized and more used as a scare tactic. All right, hopefully I was able to provide some medical insight on these demented historical practices, and hopefully by learning about such insane protocols, we can collectively pledge to build a better future free from such inhumane practices and prevent such dark chapters of history from ever repeating themselves. If you found this video educational, please check out this playlist right here for other similar videos. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. Thank you so much for watching, and stay healthy, my friends.